Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Kodak Center, presenting Lyle Lovett and John Hyatt together on stage Tuesday, March 10th. Tickets available at kodaccenter.com.
From WXXI News, this is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. Our connection this hour was made on a momentous day in the lives of a young couple. This American couple is 30 years old, and today they are closing on a house, buying their first home together. Does this sound like a fairy tale? According to a rough estimate of census data, it used to be quite common. And maybe you've seen what has become a viral chart in the last week. In 1960, 52% of Americans were married and owned a home by the age of 30. Last year, it was about 12%. One big reason people are waiting until their 40s to buy their first home is, you've heard it plenty lately, the affordability crisis. And now, Elon Musk said last week that there's good news. AI is basically going to obliterate the entire idea of money by the year 2040. Musk is now advising his followers not to save for retirement, thanks to AI. I'm not sure most economists would endorse this idea, and I certainly can't tell you that that's a good plan for your money. But for those who are struggling with what they can afford right now, today, this conversation is meant to explore just how severe the crisis is and maybe what's causing it, how to contextualize it. My guest does a great job of breaking this stuff down into plain English, and he's back to do that. Dr. Eric Morris. Eric is a portfolio manager and staff economist for Alesco Advisors. Welcome back to the program. Nice to see you here.
Thanks for having me, Evan. Always great to be here with you.
And so I want to just start, and let's get this out of the way. I don't think anybody who works for Alesco Advisors can endorse the idea that we should not be saving for retirement. But let's listen to what Elon Musk did say over the past week about saving for retirement.
One side recommendation I have is don't worry about squirreling money away for retirement in 10 or 20 years. It won't matter.
Either we're not going to be here, or
you won't need to save for retirement. If any of the things that we've said are true, saving for retirement will be irrelevant.
the services will be there to support you. You'll have the home, you'll have the healthcare, you'll have the entertainment.
Yes, you'll have it all. You'll have the home, the healthcare. What could be so hard about that? By 2040, Elon Musk says you will have all of that. Money will be obsolete. Eric Morris, can you endorse this?
No.
That was easy.
That would be risky.
Interview over.
Risky advice to follow for anyone. And I think that any financial professional, particularly those of us who have a license to practice in the profession, would not endorse following that advice.
And I have to say, I mean, like, we can laugh about this. But number one, I want to say maybe he's right. Maybe he is. And there's no question AI could fundamentally change a lot of things pretty fast. So I'm not going to joke about that. He could be right. The danger is that he's wrong and people are going to be in real trouble if they listen, because he has a lot of people who listen to him. And I suspect a non-zero number will take that advice and go, well, that's a load off my shoulders. I don't have to save anything now. Smoke him if you got him. It's like, wow, that's an amazing set of advice.
Risky advice.
Yeah. So let's start with that. Don't do that. Yeah. I also think, by the way, it's a conversation for another day. What happens by 2040? He's positing a world where money is obsolete. Everyone's got a home. Everyone's got health care. Everyone has abundance because of AI. I think it's equally likely that AI just concentrates more wealth. And it's more important that you're very careful in saving and planning for a world where jobs are harder to get and everything there may be more scarcity. I don't know. But, I mean, it seems possible too, right?
There's a lot of unknowns with it. There are some things where you look and AI certainly has the potential to follow the track of other majorly disruptive technologies, right? Attributed to Mark Twain, right? History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. So I think there's a great deal of work going into trying to understand the parallels between AI and maybe things like the internet, but maybe even more disruptive, say like electricity, right? I mean, that was so disruptive, and it changed, really, really, really changed things, not just economically, but culturally and socially. It changed things geographically, and I don't mean like maps. I mean like the way that resources are distributed across land and space, like also across time, But I think that the future is obviously yet to be seen, and it would be a really risky proposition just to take this significant departure of advice and say, yeah, you know what, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. So the reason I wanted Dr. Morris to join us is because when we talk about the affordability crisis, there's often context missing. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to really kind of pull back a little bit of the layers of the onion and try to understand the different aspects of the economy where we are truly struggling to afford things, where prices have gone up and they've stayed up. You've talked about stickiness. And Eric spent some time over the last 24 hours breaking stuff down in a way that I cannot wait to dig into. You are such a nerd. It is
such a nerd.
It is. I am so appreciative of the fact that I could give you this last minute bit of assignment, and you produce a chart for connections, which is great. We should put this in our show notes. It's so interesting to me.
It's not work. It's fun. It's just it's so fun.
Sure.
I love it.
I looked at the chart and I thought,
I love it.
Not in a million years would I want a homework assignment like this. You were like, this is so cool. So what I asked you to do was to say not just are we having an affordability crisis, but where are things really truly hard to afford based on recent history? Where have prices spiked? Where are things continuing to get bad? Where are things getting a little bit better? And then how does that relate to, especially to wages and how people are doing? And you go back over the last decade, you took it back to 2016. You also did 5 years, you did 3 years, and you did 1 year. And you found some interesting things in this chart. You want to take us through some of what we found with affordability?
I will. I want to start with a little level setting because I think that some of the stuff we're talking about, I think I might say some unpopular things.
Unpopular things?
Unpopular things. Yeah, I think that there are probably some of what I'm going to say is a classic economist thing. It's the Harry Truman, somebody send me a one-armed economist, because they're always saying on one hand and then on the other hand, right? And I think that on the other hand thing can be frustrating to people. So not unpopular, like I'm not going to say anything mean or unkind. That's not my nature. But like maybe some things like just calling that context you mentioned, like really trying to bring that to the forefront. That context matters big time. With affordability, that word, it's different than prices. When you use the word affordability, it's not just talking about price levels, and you mentioned this. It's talking about incomes, but it's talking about other things that make prices relative. Not just income, which is a flow, but also stock variables like wealth. So like what is the value of your home doing? Is that going up and down? That can creep into our psychology of how we feel about other prices going up and down, because it makes us feel more or less wealthy. Right? Our 401k accounts, our retirement savings, for people who are not retiring yet, they're not dipping into that to spend. But watching that value change can, creep into people's psychology and change how they feel about prices of things. So I want to say two things about affordability before we dig into the chart a little bit. The first thing is that affordability is inherently a relative concept. So it's prices relative to incomes, relative to wealth. Right? And it's relative to individual circumstances, which can really vary in a big way. And that gets to the second point, that affordability can be a bit subjective. You can be wading into waters where you're kind of thinking about the way individual people feel about it. And we're going to talk in broad generalizations today, and maybe you'll want to get specific about some things, but the data that we have on this stuff is broad. It's general. It's talking averages, right? Taking millions and millions of people's different individual experiences and averaging them together. Right? Just think about walking into a room full of people and you say the average height is 5'8". Well, some people are 5'3" and some people are 6'1", right? And that creates a different thing than when you talk about the world as everyone being 5'8". We're going to kind of have that conversation about everyone being 5'8", but we know that's not the case. So I just want listeners to be aware of the fact that, as I'm talking about this today, I don't want to be insensitive to anyone's individual circumstances. I certainly don't want to discount difficult circumstances, but we are going to talk about it in terms of broad generalizations.
I do think that it's interesting that psychology does play into the question of affordability. It's not just a ratio of numbers. What you and I might determine affordable might be totally different. Someone's partner might decide we can afford this vacation, and their spouse or the other partner might say, not in a million years. We're trying to save for a college fund. We're trying to save for retirement, despite what Elon Musk wants us to do. We can't afford that. So there's a lot of psychology. I get that.
Absolutely.
And I don't want our audience to be annoyed if it sounds like what Eric Morris is saying is, well, things aren't as bad as you think and suck it up. I mean, I don't hear that from you either.
That's not what I'm going to say today, right? I'm just trying to set the context, but I really want people to understand that I'm not trying to tell people how their life is without living in their shoes.
Exactly,
right?
100%. Yeah. So, all right. So you want to take us through?
I will. I'll take us through
do your best
this.
to kind of illustrate this for the for the audio audience.
It got a little complicated. Well, I wound up working on it actually in the very early hours this morning because my 6-month-old Jack was up and he was awake, and then I tried to rock him back to sleep and got him to sleep in his bassinet. But I had the computer in front of me after he fell asleep, and I had a couple hours this morning, so I worked on this. And what I tried to do, Evan, was answer this question about, look, we talk a lot about prices changing, how prices have gone up, and we know that. And we know that prices going up in the economy is kind of a feature, not a bug, right? We expect prices to go up. We know that a Coca-Cola doesn't cost 5 cents anymore, right? But we've all seen the old advertisements from like World War II with a sailor giving a thumbs up and Coca-Cola 5 cents. That's not notable. It's not shocking that it doesn't cost 5 cents. Well, why not? Because our incomes have gone up as well. So I want to kind of look at that and say, okay, prices have gone up, but how do we look at that in terms of our income, which is only one variable. But when you look across the board, Evan, on the 1-year column, what I did was I plotted how earnings have changed over that year, average earnings. So it's impossible to say how everyone's individual earnings have done, but how average earnings have changed over the past year and how the overall price level has changed in different categories.
Yeah.
So average hourly earnings are actually up 3.7% over the past year. Inflation is not up that much. So we can expect a lot of those inflation categories to actually be underpacing the average hourly earnings. And we see that with the chart, actually. There's several things here that are actually more affordable over the past year on an average basis. We look at certain things like food at home is slightly more affordable. Those are groceries.
Groceries.
That's hard. And I'm saying unpopular things. Like people are seeing grocery bills go higher, but when you look at the average hourly earnings over an annual basis going up, it's actually outpaced grocery prices. It hasn't outpaced energy services, which would be electricity and natural gas. And I think we're reading about this. We're hearing about this. People are seeing it in their bills. Their electricity bills are higher. I don't know about you.
Oh, yeah.
I have RG&E as a service provider.
Yeah.
And I just got a note from RG&E, like a text, an alert that said, here's an explanation as to why bills are going to be a little bit higher right now.
It was almost like we know you might be kind of mad.
That's it.
So
we're tiptoeing.
Before you call us, I'm like, RG&E is like sending out like these I'm scared that you're going to be really angry notices. I've never seen that before.
I've never seen it either. I mean, they have the capability to do it now, right? But that's certainly it. And it's context dependent. It's within this whole affordability cultural zeitgeist going on right now, right?
So is that where things are the least affordable right now?
That is right.
That's it.
That is the least affordable. So
energy.
Energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you look at energy services, those actually have gone up about 7.2% over the past year. And wages have only gone up 3.7%, right? So you're like, wow, that's a lot, right? That's a big difference. It is a difference, right? It matters to people's lives.
Oh yeah.
An area where it has been the most affordable relative to wages is actually in the same category, energy commodities, which is gasoline. The price at the pump.
So the gasoline price at the pump is, I haven't seen it in a month. The last a month ago, it was down year over year, like a nickel, 7 cents nationally, something like that. But 6 months ago, it was actually up nationally. And so now gasoline prices have come down a little bit, and they're not down a ton, but they're down. But wages are up.
That's right. So gas prices have fallen, in the neighborhood of 7%. Your wages, on average hourly earnings are up 3+%. So that's actually more affordable to us. Now, this is really interesting to think about gasoline being sort of like over the course of the past year becoming more affordable than most other goods, and electricity and natural gas becoming less affordable.
Yeah. How do we square that up?
Well, it's interesting because if you actually extend the time period, so this is super time period dependent, right? So that's just the experience from January 2025 to January 2026. But if you go back 2 more years, and that's including that experience, the trends reverse. So you look at a 3-year trend, right? And I shouldn't say reverse. The trends change, and the gas prices are down even further, more affordable. Electricity and natural gas become more affordable as well. If you go back to pre-COVID, actually now it's back to natural gas and electricity becoming less affordable. So it's very, very time period dependent how we look at this. So maybe the most relevant thing to do would be to go to the longest time period that I provided, which is the 10-year. So this is kind of like a half generation, right? 10-year, over the course of 10 years, the past 10 years, what's happened? Well, I can tell you that over the course of the past 10 years, average hourly earnings have gone up by almost 50%. They've gone up by 46.5%. That's pretty good, right? Many categories of goods and services that people spend their money on have actually not gone up that much. If you look at apparel, people buying their clothes, that's only gone up 6% over 10 years, compared to wages going up by 46.5%.
So clothing is, in the last decade, a lot more affordable.
Much more affordable. New cars, same idea. They've gone up 21%. Used cars, 25%, compared to average hourly earnings going up by 46.5%. Now, that matters to people, but there's other things that people spend their money on that also matter, particularly shelter. Right? And when we look at shelter, that's typically people's number one budget item that they're spending money on. It's either their rent or it's their house, which would be most people having a mortgage. There's something here statistically we use called the owner's equivalent of rent. Don't need to go down that rabbit hole. It's actually a really, really complicated and imperfect measure, but they're trying to sort of like have an apples to apples comparison of renters versus owners and how what it costs them to have shelter. And both of those numbers have actually outpaced. Those prices have outpaced average hourly earnings over that 10-year
despite
period.
this pretty good decade of earnings.
That's right.
Housing is up, up, up.
That's right. Housing is up, up, up. Now, it's not that dramatic, but small outpacing of those prices from earnings can have a big impact on people's budgets and a big impact on the way people feel as well. Because shelter, as you know, is a very, very important thing. You know, you can look at an item here, transportation services, which a lot of the change we see is from airfares, but that's also had a pretty significant outpacing of people's incomes. 54% prices have gone up compared to 46% earnings. But not everyone is flying. Right? And people can find substitutes to flying relatively easily. It's really hard to find substitutes to shelter.
So transportation services.
That's right.
But let me get back to housing for 1 second.
Sure.
So I'm looking at your chart here.
Yeah.
So it compared to the cost of energy, it's not as extreme in terms of the lack of affordability or being in the red that we don't want to be in.
That's right.
But it's in the red. And what that says to me is, I mean, that's a price that has to go up quite a bit to keep pace with a good decade of wages for it to still be in the red. And for it to be maybe the single most important budget item that people have, that's going to affect everything else, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. I mean, so what happens here is, look, we live in a free enterprise economy where individuals and businesses have a degree of freedom to be able to behave the way they want to behave. Obviously, there are guardrails in society and then specifically in certain industries and things. But when people are forced to make choices, they can adapt. And sometimes you're forced to make a choice because the price of something has gone up. So you adapt by substituting. I'll give you an example. I used to occasionally go buy a cup of coffee from Starbucks. A cup of coffee at Starbucks is like $4 now for a cup of coffee. So my wife and I make our coffee at home.
That's for a cup of coffee, not like a latte.
Yeah,
latte is like $6.
I ordered the big one. Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
But so we've substituted, and the substitute wasn't going to a different shop for a coffee. It was actually changing our behavior. It was now we make a pot of coffee at home, right? Super interesting. Now that actually reminds me of sort of something I wanted to get to too. Is I hear often from people like, oh, well, there's the reason that prices are going up is because the people and businesses that are charging the prices are pulling one over on consumers. You've heard this happen, right?
Yeah,
like this
sure.
is price gouging.
Sure.
This is right. And what I want to remind people is that price gouging can happen maybe in certain circumstances, and it's not great. But again, we have this system that works out really neatly and nicely. So if my Starbucks coffee is $4, I don't want to pay for it. There's still a whole bunch of people that are paying $4 for a Starbucks coffee, right? People are like, Starbucks can charge whatever it wants for a cup of coffee. Well, if Starbucks charged $8 for a cup of coffee, they'd go out of business pretty quick, because they'd lose a whole bunch of customers. They wouldn't buy it. On the flip side of that, people are like, well, Starbucks should lower its prices. Well, if Starbucks charged $1 for a cup of coffee, they go out of business pretty quick. Because even if they capture the entire coffee market, they're not going to be able to cover the cost of providing the goods, right? Now, Starbucks example is a little tricky here, and it gets into that inequality thing we might have talked about, where the Starbucks CEO has been flying around, jet setting around, and setting off some alarms from people being like, this is not good for a corporation. You shouldn't have this guy commuting via private jet. But they also do employ like tens and tens and tens of thousands of people. So if they did go out of business because they charged $1 for a cup of coffee, the net, you're actually losing out, right? So it's not that businesses can just charge whatever they want. They have a range they can charge for, but they're going to go out of business if they charge too high or too low.
So let me try to sum up some of what I'm seeing from your chart that I hope it's translating well to this. I really appreciate you doing this.
Yeah.
When there's 11 categories here, and in the last decade or so, 6 are less affordable, 5 are more affordable. The biggest one for most people, housing, is less affordable.
That's right.
And that's a big problem because we still haven't figured out a way to build enough housing or to provide enough housing to bring prices down. Supply and demand.
Well, this isn't rocket science, Evan. And we've talked about it on the show before. I've been in conversations with people who are kind of like, houses are so expensive. And the conversation kind of devolves where it seems like there's like they want to hint at the fact that there's this big landlord cabal that's just like, gouging people and driving the prices up like crazy. And it's actually not the case. What's happened here is that we have a tremendous housing shortage in America. I've seen estimates between 2 and 8 million units short.
Yeah.
And when there's a shortage of anything, it takes the price of that good or service and drives it up. And so that's what's happened with housing. It's just very, very simple. So to address the circumstance, it's not to artificially try to lower the price or rent control, which is just, there is mountains of research on that being a disastrous policy. It's about housing supply. It's about getting builders to build. It's about having policies that encourage building, smart building, affordable building. That will really start to make a difference in the housing price.
So if I want to grade policymakers over the last decade or through any time period on affordability, it's not just, in 6 categories are less affordable, 5 are more affordable, so it's close. I mean, to me, you got to get housing better than we've done. I mean, and this is a big blue state problem. It's been described in the book Abundance, but it's also a problem in many, many places. Policymakers have to figure out a way to kind of grease the skids to build more. And people have to be comfortable that they're going to be able to afford to buy or rent and not have their budget destroyed. So I feel like we look at this chart, but the big one's still a problem. It's in the red. It's not in the deep, deep red, but it's not good. And it affects everything else here. We can talk about energy. You can talk about food. You can talk about the price of eggs, which was apparently the whole election was about the price of eggs. But housing really, really matters, and we're still not doing it well enough.
That's right. Yeah, and here's the thing is that, policy can only impact certain of these categories so much. It's not all a policy problem, and it's not all a policy solution. But I am of the belief that there are smart policy solutions that exist, particularly to address the supply side of housing, that would help the problems that we are seeing in the housing market, both locally and nationally.
All right, I want to actually listen to a sound clip we have. And we played it last week for one of Eric's colleagues, economist Kent Gardner.
Hey, Kent was here.
He was here.
Hey, Kent.
But given what
one of my mentors.
One of your mentors.
Yeah.
Well, given what we just talked about with all these different categories and how important housing is, I do think it's valuable just to hear what President Trump said about his goals with housing prices. Let's listen.
One of the things Scott said, though, is, again, existing housing, people that own their homes, we're going to keep them wealthy. We're going to keep those prices up. We're not going to destroy the value of their homes so that somebody that didn't work very hard can buy a home. We're going to make it easier to buy. We're going to get interest rates down. But I want to protect the people that for the first time in their lives feel good about themselves. They feel like that they're wealthy people. And I want them to understand it. There's so much talk about, we're going to drive housing prices down. I don't want to drive housing prices down. I want to drive housing prices up for people that own their homes. And they can be assured that's what's going to happen.
I want to drive housing prices up. It's the first politician I've ever heard say that. I will say that, Republican or Democrat. What do you make about the substance of the remarks there?
Well, I wish I had Kent here with me to kind of kick this one back and forth. But I will say, one, I'm not a political scientist, but this, I think, is an acknowledgement of the fact that there's only so much that policy can do. I think there are bold policies that could really make a difference here. I think what's happening here is that the president has wanted to maybe not have housing prices go down, but slow the growth of housing like we've talked about here relative to people's incomes. That would certainly help things. But the administration's been struggling with that because they haven't had success. So the politically convenient and expedient thing to do would be just to change your message to align with what's going on in markets and society, right? That's what's going on here, right?
Ken thought it might be an AI clip planted by the Democrats to make Trump look bad. But no, it actually was the president saying that. And and I take your point. There's always sort of a political tinge to it.
Yeah,
but as you and I have talked about, the issue with housing is when the president says people want to feel wealthy. Well, it's nice to feel wealthy.
Can't spend your house.
You can't spend your house.
No.
And if you don't own more than one house, it doesn't matter. It matters, but it doesn't matter in the same way to have an asset that if you sell it, now you have to go buy one.
Yeah, I mean, there are ways of tapping into your home equity and things like that. So, but you're not going to pay with pay for your groceries with a home equity loan, right?
Right.
So that's not going to happen. You certainly don't want to see the number one source of wealth for a good handful of Americans deteriorate in value, because it is an asset to people. It's an asset that you use, you live in it, you get great joy out of it. I try not to think about my house too much as an asset. I try and think about it as something that my family and I use and we live in and we love. On the flip side of that, you don't want that to marginalize sections of our democracy from being able to access that same asset and the same level of joy.
Yes.
So there's a balance there, and this is the two-handed economist sort of thing, right? It's not all one or all the other. I mean, I could easily score some cheap points with people out there by being like, well, this is totally wrong. We need to make housing prices lower. Let's lower everything. Yay. And everyone's this big populist argument like that, right? But there is another hand to that, right? So there is a balance to be struck. I bring it back to the relative piece when we're talking about my chart. This chart, it's about incomes and prices. So it would be great to see people's incomes sort of outpace the cost of purchasing a new home, because it would make it more affordable, particularly to people at the lower end of the income spectrum.
Yes, and that would be more of a natural way, right, for people to be able to experience that wealth that the president is talking about. And the implication that the president gives is that if you can't afford a house, then you actually you're just not working very hard. And I don't think many Americans would agree with that.
Yeah, this is an old trope, right? That like people who don't have things, it's because they didn't work for them. So if you just want to have things, you need to work harder. Anyone with any degree of common sense knows that that's not always the case, right?
Yeah. Well, listen, let's close the loop on this, because all of a sudden the phones have gone nuts, and we're going to take
what did I say? Nothing.
I think you've said a lot of important things here. So let me close before we grab a bunch of phone calls here for Eric Morris, staff economist and portfolio manager at Alesco Advisors. I did think there was something hopeful in the chart that you gave. It wasn't all in the red. It wasn't all a chart of affordability is doomed. We're all doomed. There are some cracks of hope here. What is the most hopeful part of the research you did for this program on affordability?
Well, the hopeful thing is the fact that time periods show that these things change. And I think if you're looking at things like food at home being relatively cheaper over the past 10 years compared to people's incomes, that's a great trend, right? That, obviously the price of eggs went way up and way down, the price of beef went way up and way down, but food at home, that's a great thing. Medical care services, a little bit cheaper on a 10-year period. I mean, that's a big expense for a lot of people too. So you're getting access to medical care, better care, more sophisticated things that's actually going. It's not outpacing your income. It's actually income's outpacing that. So those are hopeful things, and I would hope that you can see that things change in time periods. Maybe owner's equivalent of rent and rent can change as well. That would be my hope.
Let's grab our only break and then phone calls, emails, feedback for Eric Morris, who we just got a comment on YouTube that says, Evan, this guy's great. You got to have him on every month. Listen, I'm with you. He's busy, but we try. We're going to come right back with your comments for Eric Morris.
Support for your public radio station comes from our members and from Bob Johnson Auto Group, believing an informed public makes for a stronger community. Proud supporter of Connections with Evan Dawson, focused on the news, issues, and trends that shape the lives of listeners in the Rochester and Finger Lakes regions. BobJohnsonAutoGroup.com.
Stream more of what you love with WXXI and PBS Passport, a membership benefit for endless access to your favorite PBS shows and local documentaries. Join today at wxxi.org/give.
This is Connections. I'm Evan Dawson. All right, I think we still have Fred on one. We still have Fred on one in Brighton. Is that Fred in Brighton on one? Hey, Fred, go ahead if that's you.
Hi, Evan. Thank you very much for taking my call.
Sure.
Couple points. I'll keep it as brief as I can because I understand you got a lot of callers going. Your guest was talking about how wages have been rising over the past decade. I believe he said what that as far as I can see, that fails to account for what people on fixed incomes have to deal with. And you were talking about how you got a text message from RG&E, as did I, saying that, oops, your bill is going to, brace yourself. There's, I guess, a whole nother story there because I have some inside contacts at RG&E, and they used to claim that they don't make any money on natural gas. 2 years ago, when there was a warm winter, there was panic going on. So that might be something worth looking into. Also, gas prices being down. I have no proof, but I think this is sort of a conspiracy thing to buy people off and think, that things are actually better than they actually are. We're going into an election year here. And I'll close by saying I'm a skeptic.
Okay.
So thanks for the call.
Yeah, Fred, thank you very much. Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, that fixed income piece is really, Fred hit on a really interesting point there because, as we said at the top, this is super context dependent. It's very much relative, and it can be very subjective and personal. So when we look at making these generalizations, and I say that average hourly earnings are up, they are up, but that doesn't apply to every person in every case. And some people are on fixed incomes, and they're not seeing the same piece. Other people are seeing their income go up 10, 15% a year too. And that's not to discount Fred's situation or what Fred is talking about. Social Security is one of the primary forms of income for people who are on a fixed income, which isn't a great situation how we got there. There are cost of living adjustments with that. They are tied in a way to inflation. It doesn't always make up for every category. So people are feeling real pain there, and I get that for sure.
Fred, thank you for the phone call. Mike in Rochester had called in to say that he says, Evan, your guest talked about average earnings, but wonders if he should be talking about median earnings.
Yeah, we've got some median earning data too. The reason I selected average earnings, Mike, is the fact that when we hear news headlines about like earnings ticked up or earnings are down, not market earnings, but people's individual earnings, their income, this is typically what's being talked about. It is not a perfect measure for income at all. There are different ways to look at it. In fact, one of my favorite ways to look at it is that there's a median to this as well, is the Federal Reserve, big institution, has the Board of Governors in D.C., but there are 12 district banks in the Federal Reserve, and each of them conducts a lot of research. They do great work. They're staffed with hundreds of economists that are like some of the world's best. And the Atlanta Federal Reserve Bank has something called their wage tracker. I would encourage people just to do a quick Google search and play around a little bit. I love this tool. The Atlanta Fed's wage tracker, and it will look at either a 3-month weighted or a 12-month weighted median level. And the reason that matters is because with an average, a very, very high or a very, very low number can drag that average one direction or another. Whereas with a median, it's just saying, hey, 50% of the people are higher, 50% are lower. So that's a way of looking at it. In statistics, Mike might know this too, you want to look at both the average and the median, but the BLS doesn't publish a median for this measure. And the Atlanta Fed is only looking at medians. So it's kind of interesting. It's not apples to apples. It's apples to oranges. But we try and look at all these different data sources there.
The average is the mean?
The mean.
And the median is the median?
The median is the median.
Okay. The one thing I can retain. Jack in Greece next on the phone. Hey, Jack, go ahead.
Oh, hi, Evan. Thanks. A great show, by the way, so thank you. Hey, affordability. Eric, I think, just mentioned before the break there about medical costs, and that's what I was going to bring up. I'm wondering if you think about affordability, or it's been talked about a lot, but I think of the medical coverage and prescription drugs. I look at that and I'm seeing, the insurance. That market, in my opinion, is just the opposite of a free market. It's the opposite of transparent in terms of getting cost of pricing, I should say. But I see the insurance premiums going up, especially this current year. When I went to sign up for this year, premiums shot up through the roof. Coverage fell dramatically, so they're paying for less, charging more. Co-pays are up, all sorts of stuff. So I would take exception to the comment that it's down, but the other is that I'm wondering for folks like me, that I am also retired, fixed income, the risk and the fear that's involved with someone in the family could come up with a serious illness, and maybe it's not covered by the insurance. We have an insurance industry that arms itself with people to fight not to pay for things. So I wonder how that if that's been dripping along over the years, over my lifetime, my working lifetime, that I saw at one point medical costs was not an issue. It never wasn't even on my radar screen as an issue, but today it is. And people go bankrupt. For their,
yeah.
And the other thing that I'll mention is that I hear politicians talk about our health insurance industry, and in my mind, that's not an industry. It's something that's you got to have health coverage. You got to take care of your health. It's not optional. It's like, well, I'm not gonna eat or drink.
Well, let me just jump in, Jack. I appreciate all that. Let's just start with this. He's saying in general, he cannot believe that we would be seeing healthcare costs or medical costs as anything other than moving more unaffordable.
Yes. So this measure is going to be looking at the services, the price of the services. The insurance costs, they are the structure of those things is different. What hits people, and the insurance industry has been moving. Insurance is part of the services piece, but it's kind of trying to track two things at once. The insurance landscape, I'm not an expert on. I have personal experience on it. My understanding is that in the COVID and immediately post-COVID, there was a fall off slightly in premiums, and there's been this massive catching up that has just crushed people for the past 2 or 3 years, and that has been really, really tough. And again, that's a significant expense for a lot of people, particularly as you get older. Maybe you're on a fixed income, and then your health bills are going up too. And the insurance market, I have to agree with Jack that it's not a free market. There's actually a whole bunch of market failures within insurance, health insurance in particular. So there are a lot of structures and regulations and things like that, and that has side effects, and some of them can be exploited in not great ways. But I will say, to go back to the data on this, over the 10-year period, medical care services are up just under 33%, whereas the average hourly earnings are up 46.5%. So, it's time period dependent, obviously, but it is something that that shows up in the data.
Let me also just ask a very, I'm reaching, I don't have a lot of education on this subject. I'm just going to ask here. We're in a weird place in society when a near household name like James Vanderbeek dies at age 48 of colorectal cancer, and there's a GoFundMe for his family. I mean, he was on national television multiple times, movies, a star, and I don't know his family personal circumstances. I don't know. So we're all just sort of on the outside looking in, but it feels jarring to see a GoFundMe for that kind of a family. Well, he's dealt with the last couple of years with cancer and treatments and surgeries and everything related to it. And he said his family's been, and before he died, he said the family's been crippled by the cost of it. And so it's one thing to look at a chart and say, well, costs are up 33%. But if most of us aren't seeing hardly any costs, but a few of us see these bankruptcy level spikes, that feels also really imbalanced. Am I wrong to look at it that way?
I'm not going to tell you your feelings are wrong, Evan. Ever.
I'm not, but my feelings can be wrong. I could be wrong.
I spent 9 years in a classroom teaching.
I can be wrong.
No, look, you're getting to a statistical thing here with talking about these not anomalies, but these very, very extreme cases, looking at that versus the average, which I think goes back to the previous caller's
median
point.
And mean, like if most people are paying $10, but a small group of people are paying $1 million,
right?
They're in trouble.
Right, that's exactly right. And I think that I don't want to get in a situation where I'm trying to prescribe whether something should or shouldn't be the case.
I'm with you there. No, you're just looking at. I get it.
But I feel. It makes me feel the same way. I don't have a base level to be thinking about what that means, but in terms of feeling.
Let me bring it back to earlier in the hour. When you look at just the raw numbers, you go, well, that should be more affordable. But you can understand the psychology of people saying that does not feel more affordable.
Absolutely.
Because if you can get crippled by your healthcare costs,
absolutely,
that does not feel affordable.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair enough. And I think Jack makes a really good point there. Let's get Monty in Rochester next. Hey, Monty, go ahead.
Hi. I don't know if your guest could do this, but of the 11 categories on your chart, is there some way to put a percentage on how much each of those contributes to a household income? And then, maybe each one has to decide for themselves. I don't know.
Like a weighted importance. And so all of a sudden your ad hoc chart that you just whipped together when you were feeding your 6-month-old this morning, this is going to become a permanent document on Connections. I just want you to know this.
I love it. Maybe it's something I should maintain.
Annual basis.
This is great.
You are now invited to bring back the Eric Morris chart. We will put it on our show notes. But Monty's got a good question. I mean, can we, over time, could you weight the importance of each category? You probably could.
Not only can we being the profession, we do. In Monty, it's imperfect because every household is different. But what the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is the government agency that is charged with, it's a nonpartisan agency. They are staffed with a bunch of statisticians and economists who are just strictly gathering and collating data for this. And what they do is that they assign relative important weights to these things. It's actually how we get that one inflation number, Monty, is that they take all the different categories, they gather the data on them, and then they weight them. And they update those weights about once a year. Different categories have different weights. Housing is the largest category, and it takes up maybe even an unfairly large amount from things that I've read. And this isn't to discount people's experiences. My housing makes up a pretty big portion of my budget, but on average, it might be a little bit lower for people than what the CPI reports. But those weights are there. I don't have them in front of me. I'm familiar generally with them, that housing is very, very
well, this is a new piece of homework for you.
There we go. Yeah. I mean, I could whip it up pretty quick.
So. But Monty's right to ask. And so we'll work on that, Monty, and we'll try to get it posted in our show notes here. I'm going to go back to the comments from our YouTube section here. There's a couple ones that I want to hit here.
Are there any more that say I'm doing a good job or no?
How many of those do you want?
I'm a millennial. I need a lot.
It says, please give us an overview of what will happen if or when the AI bubble bursts. How will it affect those of us in the 99% who aren't simply selfishly profiting off of it, and the fallout? That might be a whole other conversation.
It's definitely a whole other conversation. I think that there's a lot to be said about AI and the massive amount of spending that's going into it. I'm not necessarily a bubble subscriber per se. I don't really abide by that term in this case. There is a tremendous amount of investment going on, but it's not being leveraged in a way that would be like super scary, like .com bubble type of thing. This is not investment advice for anybody, right? That should be clear. But I just don't necessarily think that it's as bubbly as maybe some of the cultural coverage of it seems. I think we're in the early days too, so it's not to say that it couldn't be something that gets overdone. I think inevitably the firms that you see today that are investing in this, they won't be the firms that are in 10 years the leaders of it. I mean, some of them might be, and some of them won't be. If you rewind 20 years to think about the early, say, like smartphone people. I saw a headline from a Business Week or something in like 2000 or 1999 that said, "Look, Nokia's got this thing sewed up."
Nokia,
right? They got this. Nokia and Motorola got it locked up. The internet whole discussion is over because AOL and Netscape have a monopoly on the thing, and you can't have any.
Kodak invented the digital camera,
right? This is just there's a dynamism to the U.S. economy that these types of capital investments, they're racing each other, but there will be mistakes made, and there will be winners and there will be losers, and it doesn't mean society loses. It's just the creative destruction of our dynamic economy. It's a beautiful thing. It leads to tremendous innovations, but there is a rocky ride along the way.
But even if you were betting on AI, you wouldn't want to just say, well, OpenAI, Dario Amade's company.
No, first of all, I don't bet. Second of all, I would not. I would be hesitant to coronate the victors of. First of all, there will be no end game. Right, like the victors of something that's it just stops and they're going to win, right? And second of all, it's really we there's so much we don't know. We're at the tip of this iceberg. I mean, it's fascinating to me.
I mean, it's AI. There could be an end game. Anyway, all right, another one from YouTube.
Ask Elon.
I think this is Alan on YouTube. He says, I keep going back to that BLS data on the difference in wage growth between the bottom 25 and the top 25% earners. I don't have a good feeling about when this round of musical chairs ends.
All right, yeah. So let's clarify what's happened there. So what Alan is asking about, or not asking, he's talking about, is the fact that there's been a different experience in terms of wage growth between the top 25% of wage earners and the bottom 25% of wage earners. So if we rewind, 20 years, right? Maybe 15 years, just out of the great financial crisis in like 2011, 2012, 2013, the bottom quartile was not growing as fast as the top quartile. Top quartile wages were going up faster. Wages were going up for both, but they were going up faster for the top than the bottom. In around 2015, that flipped. And the bottom quartile of workers, so the lower income, the lower 25%, their wages started going up faster than the top quartile. And that lasted, believe it or not, for 9 years. It lasted till the end of 2024. And it was really pronounced in 2021 and 2022. The bottom quartile, and particularly the bottom half of earners, were seeing wage gains that were far outpacing the top half of wage earners. That has now flipped, and those gains are changing pretty significantly now. The bottom quartile is the lowest, slowest growing wage quartile, and the top quartile is growing faster. They're all falling in terms of their pace, but wages are still going up for everybody. You talk about musical chairs. I think this is really market driven. I think really what you're seeing here, there's a reason why in 2021 and 2022 that wages for the bottom quartile went up so fast, and it was because the labor market was just so gosh darn tight. Businesses were having a terrible time finding people to fill roles, and it gave those bottom quartile workers a bit of market power. They could say, you know what? I don't like this job anymore. I don't like what I'm earning. I'm going to go look for a job, and they could quit, and they could find a new job relatively quickly and easily. And if they were finding a new job, I would say that they were going to find one that was going to pay more, and so their wages were going up and up and up. Now the job market has softened. Again, this is a topic for another day because we could talk about the job market for a whole show, but the job market has softened a little bit. Unemployment's still at a nice, reasonable place, but really people aren't quitting as much. People aren't being hired as much. We're in this sort of low hire, low fire mode, and you're not seeing that wage growth anymore. In fact, it's cooling way down for that bottom quartile. So I don't know if I answered the question of Alan, but just something to consider there.
Down to our last 90 seconds. I'm not going to get through everything I wanted to.
I'm sorry.
You're going to have to come back.
I will.
President Trump recently said that the U.S. would no longer have a deficit if interest rates were dropped by 2 full points. He said, every point is $600 billion. Think of that. All we have to do If we want to go down, if we went down 2 points, we don't have a deficit anymore.
So full disclosure, Evan, you texted me this the other day, and my response was, it's complicated, right?
Yes.
So it is complicated. The interest rates, when we talk about them, we're often talking about the interest rates on Treasury debt. And that's the cost of capital for the government. If interest rates go down, that means that the tremendous debt that $31 trillion in debt that the government floats, that their interest payments would go down. Right now, it would be going down from a really high place. The net interest costs right now are hitting records. It's going to be about $1 trillion. That's high. Historically high, deficit of $1.7 trillion. That's the net interest makes up a lot of that. It would certainly be helpful if interest rates came down. Does that mean that we would eliminate our deficit in debt? No. You need a couple other things to kind of line up, right? Because just because you refinance your house doesn't mean your debt goes away, right? So you need to see some significant economic growth. You'd probably need to see some cutbacks in spending. I've studied some deficit reduction and debt reduction in the past, and it's not always necessary to have new taxes. So that's kind of a nice thing for people. Like, we don't need to have new taxes, but you need a couple other things to line up into place, and the cost of capital lowering could be one of them. But it being a panacea, I don't subscribe.
I mean, if it was that easy, I think we would have done it.
Well, there's a market for interest rates. It's not just simply click a button or the Fed says this and. Yeah, I know. That's a whole nother show. Oh, man, that music means I'm done, doesn't it?
Well, that means that in a minute, we're going to be done whether we want to be or not.
So much more to talk about.
So come back sometime soon.
I'd love to.
Because, we scratched the surface. There's a lot of interest. Listeners, we didn't get through all your emails. I do appreciate that. And I want to say, a lot of people very keenly in on the difference between average and median, which, again, we covered this hour. It is important for sure.
Very.
So you can't have this discussion without it. So thank you, listening audience, for really smart, good feedback. And thank you to Eric Morris, who's portfolio manager and staff economist for Alesco Advisors, for coming in. Thanks for sharing your time.
Always a pleasure, Evan. Thank you.
And we'll share that chart that he put together in our show notes as well. More connections coming up in a moment.
This program is a production of WXXI Public Radio. The views expressed do not necessarily represent those of this station, its staff, management, or underwriters. The broadcast is meant for the private use of our audience. Any rebroadcast or use in another medium without expressed written consent of WXXI is strictly prohibited. Connections with Evan Dawson is available as a podcast. Just click on the Connections link at WXXInews.org.